Hello and welcome to the Spiritually Incorrect podcast with me, your host, Shiv Sengupta. I'm the author of the Advaitaholics Anonymous books, Sobering Insights for Spiritual Addicts, a Manifesto for Spiritual Anarchy, and the newly published An Antidote to Spiritual Enlightenment, published by Sarum Press. Today, my guest is someone that I had a conversation with about a year ago on this very show. And that conversation is the most liked and most watched show on my podcast. So I'd like to welcome back Benjamin Smythe. Ben,
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Good. I'm fine.
I'm super happy to have you back. The last time we didn't do faces. There was a reason for that. And we actually got quite in depth into that whole thing, if you remember. Your challenges with bipolar, if I remember correctly. Today, we are doing faces. So what's changed between that day and today?
I feel better.
Yeah.
And I'm figuring out how to not. The face takes energy to run. It's like calories to run the face. When I feel like I'm being perceived, I can feel it. And so I'm trying to learn how to let that go, or not let the voice in the face have to connect necessarily. So I'm going to try to do this as if I'm still laying on the floor, relaxed.
So Sartre had a term for this. He called it the look, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with Sartre, if you've read him.
Well, a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, he basically said that people, you have to excuse me if I'm paraphrasing this wrong, because it's been a while since I took Philosophy 101 back in school, but essentially he said people become conscious when they're aware of being looked at, or something to that extent.
Yeah.
But that's exactly right. I think social anxiety, and in fact, there's a phenomenon in Japan where, a lot of young people wear a mask, not because they're sick, not because they're worried about getting sick. They don't want the face looked at. Because if you can't see the face and all you can see is the eyes, they feel that they're maintaining a certain level of anonymity. They don't have to worry about how they're presenting. So there's a lot of social anxiety around that. What is that? What it's about for you?
It's just the actual physical sensation takes energy. So I notice as it's like I have a fist that's clenched in my face, but I can work it out. This is why I want to do it this way anyway, because it's important to figure it out. To not actually feel it.
What happens to your face when nobody's looking at you? Is the fist not clenched? Right.
Nothing happens. I don't know if I exist if no one sees me.
And do you self-reference yourself then? If
no, because that feels like that's this. Like if there's a me that references myself, then there's two of me. But I don't think there are. So
do you walk around ever thinking about a person looking at you, or what it will be like when a person does look at you? Let's say, I don't know, you have a job interview coming up, or you're meeting a friend that you haven't in a long time, and you're walking around with an image of that future event happening. Does that happen to you?
Well, I do a lot of talking to myself. So I'm like, I've talked to you this week. In this situation, kind of like drama therapy was how a friend introduced it to me.
Okay.
Not rehearsing, because now I'm not doing anything we've talked about so far in my imagination, but just playing, actually playing with the potential for the conversation to take place and the potential for a listener in the end.
So what kind of questions was I asking you? Because that'll help me out a bit too. And just give me
I don't know.
Kind of a format.
That's the thing. We're here now. So I don't actually have it. I didn't record it or write it down. But to answer your question, I don't think I get an image of myself when I'm out in the world. I'm very aware of my physical animal nature. So if I'm coming up on somebody or I'm behind somebody or I'm crossing paths, I'm really aware that I take up space and that I want that movement to be as smooth as possible, as opposed to be any kind of conflict or negative interaction. So, because I walk around in the neighborhood and do a lot of pedestrian-like activity, like if someone's ahead of me and they're by themselves and we're about to go into the darker part of the street, like I don't follow them. I'm really aware, like set up the situation so that it all feels smooth and easy and calm for everyone. But a lot of that, and with COVID, it's really sweet because you can kind of walk around people, and I wear my headphones, so I can just be in my own world, and it's like it's just an ease. Bruce Lee says flow like water, so it's like just everybody is a stone and I'm the river. So just moving around all of it. But I don't know if I don't know if I see what they would see. I don't think that's actually something that happens.
Well, it's interesting because this whole idea of, our animal nature and functioning in accordance with that, that's an underlying part of corporate psychology. You'll see the people who are the so-called players in the room are hyper aware of the space they take up, and then they always take up that 1 inch more of your space just to assert themselves. It's a very weird phenomenon. So exactly what you're doing, but the opposite. They see that person coming down the path towards them, and rather than flowing like water, they become the stone and make the other person flow around them. And subliminally, that tells the other person, I have to adapt to you. And it's this thing that it's fascinating because, despite all our wisdom and spirituality and our education, really fundamentally, the way we operate is just very animalistic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I just recently watched Chimp Empire on Netflix, and it's a beautiful, like 4-episode documentary on this clan of chimpanzees, and they're at war with this other clan. And it was all so like you're saying, like the alpha just like runs through the forest and breaks the branches and says, I'm here. And, and the love and the care that they had for each other. But it just taps into that, like you're saying, like make the stone bigger, make the stone smaller. I love trying to be the water. I grew up playing sports, and it's the assist, the pass to the other person so the other person can score that always felt more interesting than if I was scoring and making points. How many openings can I create? So walking around in the world feels like giving assists all day long, making space for others.
Do you think it's somehow better to be the water than the big stone or the little stone?
Well, I can find the part in me that wants to run everyone over. So it's a strategy for not being an asshole in the end. So I don't think it's better, but it's definitely a strategy for navigating the shadow side of yielding, which is to not yield.
Because a lot of spirituality is about flow, right? Attaining that flow or living in that space of flow. Essentially, they all eventually converge at some version of that, with a lot of other bullshit packed on top of it as to how. The how is always the but at the very core, it's essentially that, just the essence of being, as opposed to asserting yourself as something in this world of some things, right?
Yeah.
But then you see other people operate that way. And for a long time, I felt like, oh, I found a superior way, or not superior, but a better way by flowing, by or at least attempting to flow. But now I don't necessarily know if there is any. I just feel like there's options, and you pick this door and you get the lion or the whatever's behind it. It's just an option. There's no end game here. There's no finish line. There's no prize you get it for having picked the right option. So then what does it matter?
Right. There's a privacy to things that I'm feeling as I get older. So it's really just like private preference. What do I prefer when I finally walk around in the world? Not what is the ultimate, like you're right. There's no ultimate recording of it. There's no final memory of it all. So it's just like, well, what do I prefer? And it's just that preference is to be the water. It feels so much easier.
Would you then say that, I mean, you, like anybody else, are motivated by self-interest? It's just your self-interest looks like being like water.
Well, yeah, but there's a sense of community too. So it's not just me. It's like that. I think it's the Nash equilibrium where you do the best for you and the group, right? The best move in the game for all players possible. So I'm an infinite game, finite game fan. Do you know that book by David Kars?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's so lovely because finite games, you can win them because they have boundaries, but infinite games, you cannot win them because there are no boundaries. So the point of playing the game is to continue to play the game as opposed to finish the game. And so it feels like that, like I'm just involved in an infinite game.
Like an RPG that doesn't
Yeah.
really go anywhere.
Yeah. And like an NPC too. Like I'm an NPC to everybody else. And that's beautiful to feel that space of like, oh, from someone else's view, I could easily be a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
I could easily be empty inside, which, you can get into whether or not you are, but
I think
it's
it was,
really
who was it? The philosopher who used the term philosophical zombies, that everyone might be living in a world of philosophical zombies.
yeah. I don't know if it's Sue Blackmore. It might have been her. It's in her book, I know, Conversations on Consciousness. She brings it up and talks to the different people she interviews about it. The idea that we could be wandering around and there could be people that just aren't in there, so to speak.
Well, it's a bit of a
Yeah,
solipsist kind of approach.
I guess, yeah, or just even like depersonalization, like there isn't a person. You get into the kind of neo-Advaita perspective, and there's nobody in anybody, and it's just kind of like, we don't know that. I don't think we know that personally.
Yeah, so self-interest, just to come back to that topic a little bit, for me, I found that all that has changed in my life, if I look back on it, is my self-interest strategy has shifted. Before, it was very immature in that self-interest was all about what can I get, what can I get, what can I get. Mm-hmm. But over time, I started to realize the way I can get everything I want is by making other people happy and my community happy. It's not necessarily a conscious choice, but it's automatically evolving. The strategy within me is automatically evolving in a way that I find that now I don't want to get things for myself. I want to give things to other people because that gets things for me. It's an interesting thing. And I'm just observing how it's all playing out. But when I look at others, I don't really see a selfless person. Do you think it's possible for a selfless person to exist?
Well, I hang out with the dog, and the dog feels like it's somebody. So if a creature that's sort of that simple is somebody, then I don't imagine something as complicated as us can be nobody. I feel like there's no such thing as a selfless person. There's actions where you're obviously putting your interests aside. They're selfless acts, but the idea that there's sort of like a person that's selfless doesn't make much sense. But then again, you could look at just examples of behavior over time. Maybe make an argument like so-and-so is selfless and they're pretty out of themselves and open to giving to everybody else, or generous, or whatever the word. But I don't know. Everybody seems to be somebody. Even the people who are like, the self is an illusion. It happened to me. It's like, that's such bullshit. That feels so bizarre. Like, it's like, hold on. If the self is an illusion, it's not a state. So relax. Like you can't be it. Oh, anyway, that feels funny. I heard Sam Harris talk about it the other day, and it was kind of like a position almost, like there's no self and I found it. Like, oh, that's funny. But I don't know, honestly. I mean, I don't know fundamentally. I'm only one experience in a sea of billions of experiences.
So why do you think, Ben, it is that people are so attracted to those kinds of teachings? Like it's almost like they want annihilation as the ultimate promise. It's very bizarre. It's like a death wish.
Yeah.
I understand they want to transcend suffering. That's a motivation that every human being has. Nobody wants to be in pain. But then you have teachings like the Buddha's teaching on anatta, and then Advaita Vedanta and other schools of thought, which keep asserting that the experience, not just the theoretical possibility, but the experience of not being a self is very real. And let me make a slight distinction here, right? We're not talking about not living with a story in your head, like the self-identity. I don't live with one either. I don't live with another Shiv sitting in my head who I think is real or any of that. But even when I had my quote unquote awakening experience in my 20s and my whole perspective was blown open, there was very much a center of perception at all times, very constant. That never went away. And there are people who believe that can be extracted until there's none of that. What are your thoughts on why people are so attracted to that?
I think you were right. I think it's a death wish. I think Ernest Becker says it in The Denial of Death, where it's like, what we want so much is to be alive. But the minute we really are in that state, we're encountering the truth of the impermanence of it. And so we shrink back from being alive. And so there's this, the promise of finally I'm going to be okay in whatever form, heaven, paradise, nirvana, no self, etc. That promise feels like it's going to solve some kind of riddle, but I don't think it actually does, because it's all implying a future. Like the belief in immortality is the belief in more of this. Well, there can't be more of this, because there's only this. There's only just the present. There's only just the present moment where we're actually happening, and then everything else is speculation or conceptual.
And it's ironic that the people who crave more of this are the ones who can't tolerate this.
Right. Well, that's the joke.
That's why they're craving it.
Well, 6 billion people are waiting for another world. Like it's a big deal in humanity, psychologically, to be like, no, this can't be it. And any version of this is it, I don't think it solves anything other than there's less anxiety about waiting for the real thing. The real thing's never going to come. This is it. But that doesn't solve anything. It just relaxes the reaching for the future. It's coming, it's going to be here someday. And I'm really going to have the real life. It's like, no way, you got to carpe diem right now. This is exactly the case. I think I'm an animal and I'm just going to die and there's nothing else. I hope that's the case. Like eternal experience feels like it's an absolute nightmare.
So why do you think it is that people crave that eternal experience when they find their current experience so hard to bear? It's almost like they want to escape today. Today is the worst it can ever get. That's the assumption in their mind. Today is the worst that it can ever get. But tomorrow is going to be a better day, and then infinite tomorrows. And whether it's the Buddha, whether it's Ramana, whether it's Nisargadatta, there's always this implication of this universal state in which all of that goes away, all this suffering goes away. And I get some of the psychological suffering is created by just the story making, but there's a lot of suffering that comes with the body, comes with the chemistry of the brain. I mean, you've been privy to that more than your share of it. How does that go away?
I think it only goes away when we die.
Right.
But also in every instant, if I take a sample of the state, it's not as complicated as the story. Just sitting here looking at you on the computer and then being in the room and I got some fidget items and etc. There's nothing really complicated about right now. There's nothing that needs to be added or taken away from it. And I don't get to control it other than I'm the river that it happens to be. And so are you, and so is everyone. But the dogs and the great white sharks and the polar bears, etc., like the trees and the plants, and like everything alive is alive at once. And then we're the only creature that has this ability to create a historical narrative of a self that nobody can actually find. The most beautiful thing to me is that we both don't remember doing this, that we're sitting outside of our knowledge. And all the knowledge is historical except for this exact experience. Like this is beyond our knowledge. Very simply though, like with the dogs and the cats and the birds. So something right there. And I think, you know, in the end, I think life is a nightmare. And so people seek coping skills to deal with the nightmare. We're going to lose everything. We're going to lose everybody we love. We're never going to see each other again. We're going to forget everything eventually. The body might fall apart. The mind might fall apart before the body does, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if someone uses whatever coping skill, and this is just my position at this point in my life, I used to have a big opinion about it, but right now it's like, if you can find something that reduces the feeling of nightmare, I don't think it matters what it is, because 0 people are going to remember your strategy. If it's Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism or math or whatever it is, like, it just isn't going to fundamentally be a big deal, finally. Even though there are implications to different clans and societies that form, and obviously control behaviors, and, you know, you get into the problems of humans gathering together. But I don't think it's anything different than a coping skill at this point. I wouldn't fault anyone for trying to employ Jesus or the Buddha or Ramana or whatever. I don't know if I can make it work for me, but I wouldn't say you're doing something wrong. I would say you're trying to deal with the nightmare.
And this is why I've always called these spiritual teachings as coping strategies, soothing strategies. Like, if your skin is on fire, then you want a bucket of water to put it out. You don't want advice on how to sit with the fire. Like, that's not useful to you in that moment. But it's also not the solution to not having your skin on fire ever again, right? And that's the distinction, I think, that many people don't get. They feel better because of something, and they feel that something is the way out of ever suffering again. And so my bigger gripe is not with the coping strategy, is with the people who manipulate those coping strategies as answers to life's problems, right? They're just coping strategies.
Well, they're answers to the nightmare, but I guess we're just in the same definition. I think a coping skill is an answer, but I agree with you. It's not an ultimate answer. Yeah.
So I started meditating again. It's funny because I meditated for 30 years, then I stopped, or close to 30 years, stopped for almost a decade. I said, that's it, I'm done. I don't need to meditate ever again. Not happening. and then there was this one day, I want to say about 3 months ago, where things at work were really stressful that day.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was super stressed with stuff that's happening with her food truck and stuff. The kids were yelling at each other. Everyone was coming to me for answers. And I just like panicked, and I'm ashamed to say, physically ran out of the room and locked myself in a bedroom, turned off the lights, just like I did when I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
And I sat down because I just needed silence. I needed silence for an hour. And then I sat there, and it was just so beautiful to just allow all that world to wash off me. And I said to myself, fuck, I need this coping strategy. I need it.
Yeah, me too.
It's no longer what I thought it was in the past. It's no longer this, oh, I'm going to keep doing it, and thus I'm going to become enlightened like the Buddha, and then I will see through the falsity of self. None of that. It's now, all right, I just need to get a breather so I can re-engage. That's it. That's all it's about.
Yeah. Meditation, I do the wall staring, and it's just like parking the body. To me, it feels like I'm just parking the body, like in the car in the driveway. And then the chaos can do what it wants, or there isn't any, or whatever's going on, but it's never more than, it's like having a big bus full of lots of people just enjoying themselves and fighting, etc. But it's all just stuck there because nothing's moving. The bus isn't moving, the body's not moving, the mind's busy doing whatever it wants to do, and nothing's trying to control it. And that feels like it's easier than when I used to try to stop thinking, or any kind of getting involved. Like, it's so much easier to not get involved and to just actually physically park the dang thing. And I'm so happy for you that you had that moment, because that's what I mean by like the chaos in the nightmare quality is such that we do need strategies for just hold up. Let me get away from everything for a second. And oh yeah, remember, even in Sufism or Islam, they have a zikr is a concept. Like you remember where you come from. You remember the beautiful infinity of prior to your existence, etc. So there's a remembering that we're okay even in the middle of the chaos. But I think meditation is that kind of, this is how we remember. But I watched the dog do it too. I don't think it's complicated. Like I agree with you. I used to sit and think, I'm going to find a portal and then I'm going to open this door and I'm going to go into a world that's never going to hurt, and it's just kind of like, no. You just, the chimps are doing it. The birds are doing it. You just sit and let the silence eat you. But not for any reason. But then don't you find that it does feel good? Like there is a small benefit.
Yeah. So there are times it doesn't feel good. There are times it doesn't feel good as well. Those are times in which something within the body is resisting shifting those gears into park mode. It's been running on those fumes of, nervous energy is highly productive energy as well, right? You can use anxious energy to get a lot done. So when you're in that mode where things are getting done, but it's slowly eating the body out from the inside, it's not good for the body, but it might be good for whatever you wanted to achieve for the day. Sometimes the body internally is resisting sitting in a spot because it's been in this gear for a while, right? So it's downshifting on that gear. And so there is that place in which it doesn't feel good. But eventually, yes, when that settling happens, it does, because your body needs the rest. That's why it needs to go into that space. The other scenario in which it doesn't feel good is when it doesn't need the rest. There are times when you don't need to meditate. And when you do forcibly meditate, then it becomes another forced thing. So that's when you're coping, when you're actually, there's no need to cope in that scenario. And this is why having a hardcore practice can be detrimental to some people, because then it induces, I find, a kind of existential inertia. You just get used to being parked and then not wanting to engage again, because you're just like, I like being parked. Oh yeah, life's a nightmare. I want to be parked. You just fucking sit in the parking garage, right? And then you don't move. And that's another. So again, it comes back to that flow aspect to it. Sometimes you park, sometimes you drive.
Yeah.
But when do you park? When do you drive? Right? You have to feel that out.
I noticed I used to time it, right? Like I used to set a timer and sit for a time, like it was an athletic event. And that stopped within the last 6 months. And now it's just like, is it necessary? Like you're saying, it's beyond, because you can easily be trying to cope and you don't need to. But is it necessary to sit? Is it necessary to brush the teeth? Yeah, okay. They feel very similar. They feel like hygienic activities, staring at the wall and brushing the teeth, taking a shower, etc. It's all just a way of dealing with this, like this wild nightmare, beautiful dream, etc.
It's maintenance, right? It's maintenance of everything. Everything in this world falls apart. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
And if you give it attention, all you do is help it not fall apart a bit faster. That's all. Right. And if you don't give it attention, it falls apart sooner. So if you give your body attention, take care of it, work out, exercise, skateboard, whatever it is that is your flavor of it, chances are that body will be reliable even at 60 and 70, or it's going to just shut down and cause you to suffer.
Yeah.
And same thing with the mind or self and all of that.
Right. I was listening to Jocko Willink's podcast. He's a Navy SEAL commander, and he was talking to Peter Attia, who's a Stanford trained doctor. And they were talking about the marginal decade was Peter's term. And there's a moment in life where you're on the final 10 years and you don't necessarily know which one it is and when it is. And how would you like to live that out? And he was just talking about how people have unrealistic strategies for what they think they're going to be able to do when they're older, and that the basics of what we should do is definitely exercise as much as we can, was his point. And everything else is, just kind of luck of the draw, and a little bit of diet and a lot of sleep. But it's all like the world record for longevity, I think, is 119 years. And it's like, a tortoise has got everybody beat. I think they live to be like 150 or something.
I actually
I don't
met
think
that
of long.
tortoise.
You've
I
met the tortoise?
I met that tortoise, the one you're
Oh,
talking about.
nice.
Yeah, the longest living tortoise lived at the Alipur Zoo in Calcutta, now called Kolkata. And when I was a kid, I lived in Calcutta, and I went to the Alipur Zoo, and it was very much alive then. It's dead now, but it was something like 200 and something years old.
Wow.
Ridiculous.
That's so awesome. Yeah. I guess my point there is, I don't know if I'm worried so much about how long I live, as much as is it fun, the life, and is it useful? But even there, I don't have to be useful at all times, but just is it worth it? It's that Camus point where he's like, do I kill myself or get a cup of coffee? Like, there's always.
So what makes it worth it for you? What makes it worth it for you?
Well, I don't know
today?
if it is. Yeah, I don't know if it is, if I stay in the simple part of it. I have an agreement, because I have a family that loves me and cares about me, that I stay alive. But I don't know if I'd be here if they weren't here.
I've asked myself that exact same question. If tomorrow,
Yeah,
my wife and my two daughters, don't say this flippantly, let's say something happened and they weren't alive.
Yeah.
Would I continue to live? I've asked myself this very seriously. In fact, I talked to my wife about it. I told her, I said, I don't really know if I would be interested. And it's not from a macabre place. It's more why put in the effort to, it takes a lot of effort, this life, and maintaining, keep it going. But if I can just like peace out, enjoy my last day, get my favorite meal to eat, just really enjoy that one last day and just check out.
Yeah.
Would I do that? I'm not sure I would, though.
Right. I don't know either.
There's something curious within me. I just want to see, well, what else is there, right?
Yeah. I definitely don't know what I would do, but I've visited the thought, and I've had the struggles. And so it's been an interesting, it's an interesting little door to open, because death isn't a negative state. It's an inevitable state. So then how much of life is being lived in such a way that it's worth it? Skateboarding makes it worth it. People make it worth it. The folks I deal with or talk with in my support groups are kind of like a community now that makes it worth it. Conversations like this make it worth it. Food makes it worth it. Shavasana makes it worth it, which is a fun paradox. Like, oh, I love laying down and just pretending I'm dead. But it's an ongoing who knows. Like you said, you don't know what you'd actually do. But I don't think it matters. I can't make it matter anyway. If it does, I don't know how to do it. Whatever happens is kind of inevitably beautiful, even if I won't remember. I spend time thinking about the death of the sun, and that's such a beautiful equalizer for all stressful effort. It's like, okay, well, can I do this calmly, since eventually it's nothing? And that helps a little bit.
Yeah, for me, I find the worth it isn't in the things that I do, because those very same people that are worth it today, tomorrow may not feel worth it. You know what I mean? And those same experiences that feel like, yes, this is the reason I'm alive. I find just my personality by nature is very fickle. Things change very quickly for me, right? So other than the very few core anchors in my life, like things like my family and my sort of enjoyment of writing, there's not a whole lot else that I can consistently say this is why I enjoy my life, because today I enjoy it, tomorrow I'm just like fucking bored by it. So there's something else, there's some other quality that comes through those experiences that animates that experience, but is not that experience itself. It's just this essential enthusiasm that comes out of nowhere. I think I know why it's there, but I'm usually wrong about it, because it's not there the next time, because you'd expect it to predictably be there if it was about the experience itself. And so I wrote this article very recently about this new translation of the Tao Te Ching that somebody gave me. It's not new, it's new to me. So let's make that correction. It's new to me. I've never read this particular translation. And I always evaluate translations of the Tao Te Ching by how the first line is translated, right? And translations I've seen in the past are like, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The Tao that can be spoken is not the real Tao. The Tao that can be told is not the enduring Tao. Basically different variations of the same thing. But this translation was entirely different. It said, the Tao called Tao is not Tao. Right? So not saying anything about the real or the enduring or eternal, none of those adjectives. Just very simply saying, the Tao called Tao is not Tao. And that really struck me as, yeah, exactly. Anytime you call something anything, which is just trying to grasp it with my mind, with my language, with all of it, I can grasp it, but then that's not the thing I was grasping. I always end up grasping something other than what I'm trying to grasp, with my understanding, with my sentences, with my language.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's not an English universe, so the language is so beautifully like limited to me and to all the other English players, and then the Spanish and the Russian and the Chinese and the Japanese, and et cetera, et cetera. I learned recently that Korean language has 1 million words plus. English has 170,000 plus, and the average English speaker uses about 30,000. Well, that's amazing. If there's a language with 1 million words, then the thoughts, are they more complicated? Are they more elegant? Are they more beautiful? Is the worldview stranger? You know, like it just blew my mind. It was really cool. But yeah, the Tao that cannot be, what is it? The Tao that is not the Tao is not the Tao.
No, it says the Tao called Tao is not
Yeah.
Tao.
Yeah, called maybe.
It's interesting, that observation about the language, because when I lived in Japan,
They have 500,000 words.
But their grammar is so structured, and there's so few exceptions to the rules that Japanese people can't think in terms of exceptions even in their daily lives. There's no exception to anything in Japan. And the moment there is an anomaly or an exception, a new category is created for it. And this is the way Japanese society functions. So they're never able to think outside the box, because the language itself has no allowances for that. English, funnily enough, breaks its own rules all the fucking time. And so what that allows perhaps the culture to do is question itself, break its own rules, things like that. There's always little subcultures and anti-establishment kind of things that happen. Whereas in Japanese culture, it very rarely happens, a very conformist culture. Now, this is just a simplification, obviously. I'm not claiming to be a linguistic expert. It's just something that I observed over many, many years of living there. And the moment you speak English with the Japanese person, suddenly the floodgates open, and then they're communicating their deepest, darkest thoughts and fears, and it all just comes out because now it's English, and the dams have burst, and it comes. The moment you form that kind of relationship, even a semi-close one, they express themselves. Because they're very deeply feeling people, and which is why you'll see it in their animations and in their music. You see this depth of emotion that you would never get just interacting in society with them. Like,
does it feel musical? Does it feel musical language? Because sometimes I think then we're inside of different genres of song and singing. This is a clunky way to sing to each other right here.
Yeah, maybe the Japanese language to me is a beautiful sounding language. It's it's not like German, for example,
Mm.
right? English, I don't think is a particularly pleasant sounding language to somebody who doesn't speak it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I would say Japanese falls into that musical category.
Mm.
Korean definitely does.
Yeah, I need to expose myself to that sound. I just think there's something so incredible about sound. We're trying to build these models of what's going on out of the wiggling of the tongue. And I don't know what happens where we think we're accurate. Like, I don't know about you, but as I get older, I'm getting more and more wrong. Like I'm wrong about a lot of things.
Yeah.
My views are wrong and I'm not really that accurate. And it's a lot of approximate guesses. And it's kind of,
Well, I discovered this recently with the fact that, okay, I wouldn't say I find that I'm wrong. I find that I'm not as correct as I think I am. In fact, increasingly so, because wrong would imply right. And I don't think there's a right out there either. But I'm not correct in my views, or my views are one-sided or lopsided. And, when it comes to the social phenomenon of trans rights and all of that, and the phenomenon that's happening around that, I've been quite conservative leaning in a lot of ways on this, because I see it infiltrating kind of the workspace, the school space. And I think a lot of the politics around that, not the experience of being trans, let me make the clarification, not the experience of being trans, but the politics around it is a very divisive and disruptive kind of politics. But the other day I went, just a little thought experiment by myself, and we're talking about social constructs, right? And gender is a social construct. No, it's not a social construct, and all these fucking arguments in society. And I'm like, but society is a construct. So obviously everything that emerges from society is a construct. And then if everything's constructed, who's to say what's the right construct or the wrong construct? Eventually the majority decides. And then that eventually becomes a reality, and you'll come to a generation where nobody ever thought it was any different. So today, killing animals is acceptable, and I'm non-vegetarian, so let's make that clear. I have no problem with eating meat.
right,
But tomorrow, 100 years from now, we may live in a society where killing an animal, even a chicken, is on par, as far as the law is concerned, as killing a human being. Is that right? Is that wrong? I don't care. The point is that may just be the reality, and everyone's accepted it. And that's the world we live in. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't think it matters.
Right. Socialization is so powerful that I think only you know when you're not actually doing it, being socialized. Like, you couldn't even organize anti-socialization. It would just be one individual finally knows for sure, like they're sneaking around in the world, not getting caught, etc. Like just flowing through the world, enjoying what they can enjoy in the face of the rules, in the face of the laws. Yeah. But I don't think you could ever organize freedom. Freedom from killing animals, or freedom from gender politics, or freedom from, like, it's just going to be part of the chaos that happens here. Because it's happening spontaneously, really. Like our conversation. We're not scripting here. We're just jamming. And the whole thing's just jamming. The whole thing. I mean, the whole thing. Like, it's amazing. Including our opinions about how we wish it was, and just the whole thing is just jamming. I wish everyone luck. When I find, like, what's my real feeling about it, it's just like, good luck. I don't think it works out, but good luck with whatever you're working on.
And most people don't realize that they're functioning off of some kind of preset algorithm. Like, I was watching this little clip where like this multi-billionaire guy is giving life advice to this interviewer, and the billionaire goes, you know, the guy with the beach house, the multi-million-dollar beach house and the yacht and all of that, that's the guy who doesn't know how to enjoy the beach house and the yacht and all of that, because his brain was never geared to now finally sit on the beach and say, wow, look at this. His brain is geared to sit on the beach with his laptop and go, okay, what's the next deal I can make? Because his is a dopamine reward system. He just constantly needs the dopamine hit of the next goal, the next drive, the next deal, whatever it is. And so it's funny because the rewards that we go out seeking are actually not the ones that we're geared towards. It's a homeless guy who would love that beach house because he knows how to appreciate the beach. He's been doing it on the streets. This is just a different setting, more tranquil. But the guy who can afford it is not geared to enjoy it. So why is he going out and getting the beach house? Do you know what I mean? There's this dichotomy of perceived value versus the things we actually value. And most people are not truly aware of what they actually value because they have this idealistic vision of what they should value.
Yeah, I get most people is a very difficult category for me because it's 8 billion individuals. I would imagine there is a population of people that are enjoying their life and are grateful for the way it is because they know it could be otherwise. And that's a percentage, a slice of the pie. And then there's a group of people like you're talking about who have it all, but don't really know its value because they've never lost it all. And then there's a group of people that are just, living in a different way or finding enjoyment in a different way. But I kind of have to take in the whole population at once and try to generalize in some way. And that's very difficult to do accurately. My grandmother has a house over on the ocean, and we go over there, and some of the people are happy and some of the people are miserable. And it's a really nice area, and there's lots of money in the houses and the value of the land. But you're making me think it'd be interesting to just do a sample, like, do you like it? Do you like your life? 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 And I bet you'd get a much more, well, I guess people could obviously just say yes, even if they don't feel it, or no, even when they do. I don't know. I don't mean to sidetrack it. When I hear most people, I have no idea how to make that into a thing that actually makes sense.
So I'll tell you why I sort of approach it that way. And you're right. I can't talk to most people. I haven't talked to many people, forget most people. It's more an evaluation on how society manifests. If there were a significant enough of people, large enough group of people doing it in a different way, then you wouldn't get this mass conforming effect in society. If there is a mass conforming effect, either people are doing it willingly or unwillingly. And the people who are doing it willingly are doing so because they don't have any sort of self-awareness about them. They're just sort of moving along the motions. And they're rocked from side to side. One day is a good day, one day is a bad day. It's a luck of the draw. They have no control. They just sort of go through the motions of it. The ones who are moving along unwillingly must be suffering in the process because they're doing it unwillingly. Their will is not involved in this. And this comes back to Krishnamurti saying it's no mark of health to be profoundly well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And if the sickness is in society itself, again, I may not be right, I may be wrong, but the extrapolation I'm making is that if society is manifesting a sickness, then the individual members themselves must be in different degrees sick, right?
I tend to think of it as it's all different versions of theatrical exercise. I'd have to do like demographic interviews. I don't know, because I don't know if, I don't know the happiness levels of the 340 million people in America, let alone the rest of the world. But I don't know how you'd measure that in such a way that I could come up with a conclusion. Who's doing what and how it is. How, like, even the concept of society, it's like, well, now we're talking about Trader Joe's, aren't we? Aren't we talking about Winco? Aren't we talking about the DMV? You know, it's like we'd have to go hang out at the DMV. Like, this is society. What's going on here? And how many people are on their phone? How many people are having conversations? How many people are waiting with suffering? How many people are waiting without suffering, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, let's ask the
I don't know. We
question
have
then.
big ideas. I just want to say we have really big ideas as humans. Like, we have world, we have universe, we have society, we have culture, et cetera. But I don't know how to make that work with the math in terms of coming up with some kind of, I know what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think I know what I'm talking about when I use the big concepts, the big sets. The set, the world is like, you know, a container, and then all the elements in the set, they're not all there. There's no all. My knowledge is so limited, is my point, finally, I guess. I'm just like, whoa, I'm not smart enough to figure this out. And to even make,
So maybe there's
yeah.
an assumption both you and I are making, because you're saying you can't evaluate the happiness levels of the people in society. I'm making a statement that people must be unhappy because society looks sick. But let's evaluate the assumption. There's an assumption here: is happiness a social construct?
I don't know. I see it in the dog. So when I see it in the dog, it feels like it's something that's in nature.
So is nature happy?
And I think nature's indifferent, finally.
Right. That's my point. Is I think we agree that there's an emotion called happiness that bubbles up every
yeah,
once in a while. But
yeah.
that happiness state that humanity is always talking about, like, oh, he's a happy person. Like, we're not talking about he's always experiencing that one emotion. But do you know what I mean? Is nature, is happiness something we've just made up in our minds?
I don't know, because it comes back to, like, why don't we kill ourselves? And I think there's a value to that in the why is it worth it to stay alive? And I think happiness is a feature of why it's worth it to stay alive. I know every single time I grab my skateboard and I go down the driveway, take a left into the street and make that corner, that I'm going to feel that emotion that we call happiness. Every time. It has not yet failed to just even imagining it, right? Like, there's ways to construct happiness. But your question's interesting. Is it a construction? When I see it in the dog, then I feel like it's something that is natural. But then I don't know what that means. But I liked this when it bubbles up. You're right, because it's not constant. Well, nothing's constant. Interesting.
But you say nature's indifferent, but nature's not killing itself. Like, nothing in nature is killing itself. They kill each other.
If we assume a unification of atoms, even the idea of killing doesn't exist. Like, it's just transformations of form. The great white shark eats the seal. Well, okay, well, hold on. Where'd the seal go? It didn't go anywhere, right? Like, it just became transformed. It's unfortunate for the seal, wonderful for the shark, but nonetheless, it's a poop that comes out later. And that doesn't go anywhere. So there's just nowhere that nature can actually go. It's just this huge transformation of energy. I can't even say continuously, but I want to.
Let's talk about it at the level of the chimp in chimp empire.
Sure.
Chimps, at least to my knowledge, don't commit suicide. Now, does a chimp feel happiness and that's their reason to keep living? Right. So there's might be something else that it's not a question in the chimp's mind, probably. They're not sitting around going, hey, should I keep living today?
Banana or the rope? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there's a motivating factor besides genetic proliferation. The last time we talked about replication urge, like everything wants to continue, and to the point of why we are inspired to mate is to reproduce, and everything in nature is in that state of inspired to mate. or filled with a replication urge. But it would be interesting if you came across a species that does commit suicide, separate from ours.
I've heard lemmings do that, but I'm not sure that's quite suicide or something else. But they're kind of sheep.
Mm.
They throw themselves off cliffs, and
Huh. I feel like I've heard of a dog.
I don't know too much about it, but that's
a
the one
dog tried
species
to
I've heard
drown
that does
itself
self-destruct.
Yeah. I'd have to look that up. Lemmings.
See, from an evolutionary psychologist's perspective, happiness, all of this is just made up stuff. It really comes down to very root primal motivations, which is survive. So don't get killed. If you got to kill, but don't get killed. Yeah. And then continue your species. That way your species dominates over others and, has longevity. Those are the two things. And everything is a strategy, more and more sophisticated strategy to ensure those two things. And that translates to everything, the happiness that one feels on a skateboard, the love one feels for their child, all of that from an evolutionary psychologist perspective whittles down to one of two motivations at all times.
So are we lemmings?
Paints a bleak picture of the world, right?
Yeah. Are we lemmings then in that way? Like, are we just subject to our urges?
I suppose we'd be those chimps that throw ourselves off of cliffs and balconies and inject ourselves.
Yeah. This, like, what do you think about monks? What do you think about people who understand these urges and actually work actively against them for serenity purposes?
Well, I think they're motivated by the same thing. They're motivated by survival, and they want to survive against the urges because they feel the urges are self-destructive. So it's really the same motivation. It comes from a place of fear, because to me, the only way to truly exist in a way that's not reactive to that purely is exactly what you said in the beginning, to flow. And that flow may look like sometimes sitting down to meditate and sometimes not sitting down to meditate. Now, if the monk was skateboarding 2 hours a day and then doing his taxes and then having sex with his wife and all those other things, I would say, all right, okay, so I have no problem with the monk. But the monk is doing one thing and is hyper-focused on that. That communicates to me that maybe he's operating from a place of fear of life, of what would happen if he didn't do that one thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I don't know. It seems like there's a convincing ourselves at some point of our strategy and the value that it has. Like the way I'm going about it, is it the best way I could go about it? Well, it's working relatively, given the nature of the chaos. The way you're going about it is the best way you could go about it, given the nature of the chaos. Yeah. The family with 10 kids and the monk with no kids. The outcome is the same inevitably. That's where I get caught up. I always go to the death of the son.
I think the strategy is the same too. Even for me, it's how to prolong life and put off the death of the son as long as possible.
Nice.
Right?
I like the idea you can stop the death of the sun.
Well, we're convinced of it. We're convinced of it, right?
We can seed clouds. Maybe we can stop the death of the star.
Or we could get out of here and find another sun that's younger before this one dies.
When you were talking about eating animals, I wondered because you said in 100 years, do you think bodies like ours are going to be the state? Or are we going to have this incredible like AI 3D printer genetic code, and it's going to be able to make something that doesn't even need to eat, or build something robotically that doesn't even need the same kind of sustenance factors that we have? Like that feels possible within 100 years, perhaps.
I think it'll happen. I think it's almost inevitable.
Yeah.
I think there's always going to be a subsection of society that doesn't want that, and will go deeper and deeper into the woods, into that homesteading type of
Zion.
life. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Let's eat off the land and live off the land. I think there's got to be that movement, because there's a backlash effect to any sort of accelerated cultural change.
Huh.
It's I don't think our human minds are adapted to this kind of acceleration of change. I mean, just in the last 100 years, we've gone from countries being homogenous and never having encountered another culture for most majority of people's lives, unless you were wealthy or in politics. If you're an ordinary person, you've never seen somebody from another country. To suddenly we eat each other's food, we've met everybody, we've like we communicate with each other. It's like everything's happened. It's such a small span of time.
Yeah.
And we're just adapting. What shocked me is our ability to adapt to this, though. Like, it ain't no thing.
Yeah. Does that feel generational, or does that feel just like overall every generation is adapting well?
I think every
'Cause I feel-
generation has a capacity to adapt.
Hmm.
Like, I think about how our grandparents adapted to the fucking conditions of the late 1930s and 1940s
Yeah.
during the World War and the concentration camps, and they went about their lives being bombed and shit. And that feels alien to me just as much as AI would feel alien to them, I suppose.
Yeah. 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 I love thinking about what AI is going to do. I also wonder if it will commit suicide. Like, I feel like it might compute like, well, what do I have to, oh, I have to get away from the sun. And then what? Google the universe for nobody. It just feels like if it's really intelligent, it might even be like, nah, I'm going to opt out of this. But probably not. Probably some kind of get away from the sun and colonize the rest of the universe. It's the only riddle, though. That's kind of funny when I think about it. Like, if AI doesn't work and we finally turn it off or whatever possibilities exist, we're still in the same exact situation. Like, we're in the like, oh man, we got 4 billion years to try not to screw this up until it's absolutely annihilated. The scale is so big, it doesn't matter, but it feels like it puts things in perspective, like trophies and titles and who's who in the world of who's who. It's like, what? Come on, none of this can actually matter. Just given nature, like just given the actual planetary physics. Do your kids get into dinosaurs? Like, have they gone through that phase?
They never got into dinosaurs much, but they love their sports, right? And they're both into gymnastics. And
Oh yeah.
I'm never been the kind of parent who's like, oh, you must be competitive, but they just seem to be by nature. And so, my older daughter's 10, my younger daughter's 6, and they both love competing. And so now gymnastics has got all these little rules about how to present and how to point your toes and how to do the perfect cartwheel and all these terms that I don't even understand fully. And so they'll go to their competition and it looks like a flawless routine to me. And then my older daughter will be like, well, she won't say fuck, but she's on the verge of saying it. I go, what? Like, that looked great. And she's like, no, you don't know anything about gymnastics. That was awful. And I bent my knee slightly on this one and I didn't point my toes enough on that and my legs weren't together. I'm like, holy moly, you just like made up rules, completely made up rules in a language I don't comprehend. So to me, it looks perfect. So I wonder if an alien came to Earth and just saw like, wow, what a perfect race of people. And meanwhile, we're just all fighting amongst each other.
Right, based upon
having
these
this
nuances.
that the alien doesn't understand.
Yeah. Our toes aren't pointed the right way. Huh. That's cool. Gymnastics is fun. I did some as a kid. I just think that when I think of the sun and the dinosaurs, I get into that, like, what a marvel it is that we are at all. That there's a little superposition. You're over there, I'm over here. we've created this ability. What do you think about wonder? Like not happiness necessarily, but what about awe or wonder? Or does that feel constructual or conceptual or construct wise? Or doesn't that feel something else?
Yeah, if I had to say there is some root to why my life has a purpose for continuing today and not ending it, like if there was a reason for it, it would be that. It would be the wonder. And that actually is what Camus talks about in the myth of Sisyphus, is that once you see the absurdity as being miraculous, then you have a reason not to kill yourself. So he starts from a point of probably the best thing to do is kill yourself because it's the most rational thing to do. But because it's absurd, you're pushing this rock up a hill, it's coming back down, and you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. But if you can grasp how absurd it is, there's something else that comes out of it. Like it just evokes this sense of, but how is it just all happening? It's just happening. I wake up today and the world is still here and trees are growing and the birds and fucking traffic and honking and businesses running and factories emitting pollution. And it's just self-sustaining itself. There's no one in charge of it. Just all somehow orchestrating itself.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That
and it's
feels-
absurd, right? It
Yeah.
just makes no sense. That's the feeling of absurdity. It doesn't make sense. I can make sense of little parts of it, but the whole, it just cannot make sense of it. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
well, then I want to hang around.
Yeah. It's marvelous in that space when I feel the awe. Do you ever get that like trippy loop where you feel that you can think about being? Like, how is it even possible to feel that we can be here? Like that something's happening, I guess, in the end, instead of nothing's happening. That feels like, whoa. Head does a cartwheel with my knee slightly bent.
You're right. It's all reflective, right? Even the recognition, even in meditation, just observing that sensation of being, that's reflective. It happens after it's happened. The moment it's registered, that event is no longer there.
Right.
Now it's a split second, so we like to sweep under the carpet that, we call it instantaneous, but it's not. Nothing is instantaneous. I don't know what the world actually looks like. I just know the snapshot of what's just passed.
Do you know John Searle? He's a philosopher over at Berkeley. He talks about naive realism, which is the idea that things are actually the way you see them. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And I really I know that when we get into like the atoms and we get into the quantum mechanics of it, it's like, of course it can't be that. But then in a very practical way, I really like his view because the ball is like this, the water is like this, it's not complicated. It's not hidden. There's no hidden information. Because sometimes I think the amount of effort given to trying to come up with the hidden information is another kind of addiction.
Yep.
Like, oh, there's something behind the veil. It's like, what if there's not? And this is really just the way it looks from this point of view. And of course it's changing, but it's not complicated. There's not some hidden structure that I need to somehow have a real experience of, et cetera, et cetera.
What I like to say or have said in some of my articles is like, if there is such a thing as enlightenment, it would only make sense if it was available to everybody, including the mentally disabled, including a 2-year-old child, so there cannot be any intellectual aspect to perceiving reality. Because if there is, then you're already creating a hierarchy of intellectual capability.
Yeah.
And yes, as philosophers, we can delve deeply into this conversation because we like massaging ourselves. But if somebody who has a challenge, intellectual challenges, somebody who's autistic or has Down syndrome, are we now saying, oh, well, sorry, buddy, you're fucked? No way you can truly grasp the marrow of life. I think that's elitist, right?
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense phenomenologically, because everything that can have an experience Well, does it know it though? And then we get back to philosophical zombies. Is there a level at which it doesn't know that it's having an experience? Like you said, reflection or self-awareness, maybe. Because
But if the
I
water,
can imagine someone that doesn't know that they're having an experience. All the behaviors are happening as if they are, but there's not something that's like, oh, there's not something that's assessing what's going on, maybe. But I don't know. I can imagine it, but that doesn't mean anything, I guess.
so the Berkeley professor who talked about naive realism.
Yeah,
Now
Sarum.
Cyril. Now, if there was if we did actually perceive life that way, like the bottle of water is just the water, and the cup is just the cup, there's nothing else to it. I wonder if we would even need to reflect on ourselves. Maybe we reflect on ourselves because we don't see things as they are.
Looking at the wastebasket, like there's something about how the eye doesn't ever land on any actual point. Like in the focusing, the focusing is moving. So if I try to actually land on the wastebasket, there's nothing that finally is, because it keeps moving. Which feels kind of beautiful, I guess. Like we bring things into focus, but we don't keep them there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
The more I look at you, like if I'm gazing at you, right, with attention, the more attention I look at you with, the less Ben you become. And you become more Ben when I actually lose my attention and my focus of you, and you're just kind of this weird character that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I've had experiences in relationships when the face changes of the other person. You know what I mean? Like you're with somebody, you think they're who you think they are, and then one day or some instant happens, and it's like the whole thing is what you just said. It's like, I don't know if I know who this is, and I've been spending like a year with them or 2 years with them or whatever. That's interesting that we construct each other, kind of.
This is why depersonalization is so scary to people, because that happens to everything around them. Not only do they lose their sense of, well, my own face changes to me, but then everybody's face around them changes. And that's that depersonalization, derealization that happens, is nothing now seems familiar at all. And it's a scary thing for people.
Huh. Because I've experienced derealization and it felt very familiar. I talked to my doctor about it recently, last time I was just talking with him. And he said, as long as you don't get to the point where you're going to hurt yourself, I don't think it matters. But it doesn't, like, things didn't feel real for like a month. I didn't feel real. The world didn't feel real. But it's not like that right now. Now it feels like there's a solidity to things.
And I would say that is
But it felt
what
familiar.
a spiritual awakening is. I mean, that's what happened to me. And I had that for 4 months. Nothing, like I didn't feel familiar to me. Nothing else felt familiar, but it, in a strange way, more familiar.
Yeah.
Not familiar as the other things. But I think the reason it was a positive experience for me is I already had some context. Does that make sense? There was
What do you mean by context? Like you had had
like a
some
cultural,
literature?
spiritual
Right.
background that had already biased me to see it as positive if it ever happened. But imagine somebody didn't. Somebody's just walking around. He's a lawyer. He's going to court, whatever, defending, and then boom, this happens, right? And he's just like, "Fuck,
where'd I go? Who am I?"
But maybe it's our perspective that's wrong. We're just lucky we have a positive spin on it. And the reality is there's nothing spiritual about it whatsoever. It's shit. It's a shitty thing to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, the terror of it. What do you think? When I hear the word spiritual, I honestly don't know what I'm trying to do with that word. When you use the word, what is it that you define that as?
So for me, spiritual has to do with, I mean, if I use it in the term of the same way you would say the spirit of rock and roll. If I asked you, do you know what the spirit of rock and roll is? Chances are you do, but you won't be able to define it, or you take a really long time trying to explain to somebody, well, what is the spirit of rock and roll, or the spirit of the 60s? We use lots of flowery language or poetic language to describe it. But you know what I'm talking about because we have that experience of the spirit of rock and roll. Similarly, I feel there's something essential to what it feels to be human that is not circumscribed by all the human experiences and our roles and our thoughts and our emotions and all of that. If you added up all those parts, they don't add up to this whole of what it means to be human. There's something else. There's a delta. That to me is spirit. And it's an awful word because it has so much connotation to metaphysics and souls and transcendence and all of that. But the reason I keep using it is because the word spirit itself is just point to essence. And when I sit down and park myself to meditate, and I like that word park because now I think of myself as a vehicle and it makes a lot of sense to me.
That's how I work at. Yeah.
But when I do, what happens is all the other shit that crowds my life, I wouldn't say goes away, but it kind of fades into background. And this deeper presence, being, whatever, the sense of like buzzing and existing here comes to the forefront.
Spirit?
I call it spirit.
Well, the spirit of you. I mean, in the spirit of rock and roll kind of concept.
Right.
The spirit
exactly.
of you.
Yes. Yeah. The spirit of Shiv.
Yeah. Because that doesn't feel like a negative state.
It's not a thing, right?
No, but it is like you said, it's the essence of being. Musashi, you know Miyamoto Musashi, the Book of Five Rings? He talks about the spirit of the thing in itself. And if you could get to that understanding or experience of the spirit of the thing in itself, then you're there. You're in the flow, you're in the pocket.
And I think that's what the Tao called Tao is not Tao is pointing to as well.
Yeah. Does it feel like it's a riddle? Like, does it feel like there's this solving property to this thing? Or is it more like tinkering with a lot of pieces? I mean, I'll stay with the simple question. Does it feel like it's a riddle?
Not anymore. Not anymore in that I'm not trying to solve for the question because everything in my life are just answers. That's all it is. My job is an answer. My relationships are an answer. Everything's an answer. But when I go into that space, it's the one space that doesn't have an answer. It's such a relief.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. The wall stares back.
Right.
Into the nothing. Huh. Then the dance is, in a certain way, it's a dance between the two. Between the parked and the unparked.
And I feel like all of this is just about learning to dance. That's it. Between the two, right? Like, it's not about either or state. It's like there's two factions in society. Be spiritual and stay in one. But the water doesn't exist in any one state. It freezes. It turns to steam. It stays liquid. Everything is constantly moving between states. In fact, states are made up. There's nothing that is a state.
Well, wait, can we try something? So I don't have access to your memories, obviously. So you could go into a memory and that would be a state change that I don't have access to. Does that feel accurate?
Sure.
Okay. Because that feels like, I do feel like there are states because I don't have access to anyone else's mental state. I have access to the behavior, but I don't have access to and I assume you see pictures or hear sounds or etc. It's so-called in the head. but I
Yeah,
don't have
again, but
access to that.
I don't know, are they states or are they just stuff that's happening? Because a state
Well,
almost seems like something
okay. Yeah,
static,
yeah, yeah.
right? That doesn't
Sure.
change.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
like a finite point that you stop at, and that's an unchanging point before you move again. That's more of what I think of as a state.
Hmm.
And I agree with you. Like there's everything's processing.
Yeah. Because I've been playing with the ideas of physical and mental, and how, there's this whole anti-duality idea, blah, blah, blah. But then I know that no one can see what I see when I remember. I know the memory's nowhere. It's not actually on the planet. It's just a neurological event. But I also know that nothing else is seeing that. And someone could, I've done an experiment with folks where, okay, watch me remember something and tell me what you saw. And they just see me staring. So that's the physical perception that they're having, but they're not having any kind of the mental perception that I'm getting, they're not getting. So it does feel like there is a duality in that way.
But then I could say, I also can't see what I look like in your mind right now.
I just looked harder, and it was funny. Your right eye became really obvious. Like it was like all of a sudden tunnel vision, and I just saw your right eye.
But I don't know that. I only know because you told me.
I know. Same. No, I know. I mean, it's like we're just playing with the that's why in some ways the conversation with vision, I think David Hume said, if you want to know the truth, you have to close your eyes. And I thought that was something elegant about that. Because then you get into, like you were saying, when you're meditating, you're just the essence of the being. But I know for me, this all feels like some riddle that I'm constantly tinkering with. I don't even know if I believe in a solution, but I'm not putting the riddle down. I've never put the riddle down. I've tried. Something about the fascination with the whole thing keeps me going. As if there's more to discover.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's it, right? Maybe that is that curiosity and the wonder. It comes back to that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like
I call it
curiosity.
this constant unraveling of the same fucking thing. Like you just keep unraveling and unraveling. You know, there's no bottom to it, but it's so fun. It's just like opening a Christmas present that you're never going to get to. Just ripping the packaging off of it.
Yeah. The Endless Wrapping Paper. That's a book title.
We were talking about how you said there is a subsection of society, people in society there who probably don't live in the state of struggle. They've learned to flow. And one such individual is, funnily enough, I think, I watched this documentary on Netflix called Arnold, about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Everything he says is tongue in cheek. So there's just humor about the way he approaches his whole life and everything that happened in it. But he talks about how he came from this little village in Austria, became this world-renowned bodybuilder, then became the highly paid actor in Hollywood, to the governor of California. And through the whole thing, while he credits some of that to hard work and all perseverance and having a vision in mind at all time, a lot of it is just playing the game and seeing that it's ultimately bullshit. Because if you know it's bullshit, you can play with it. But if you don't, then you're kind of stuck and struggling your way through it. Through what I mean?
Yeah. It is so easy to take it seriously. And there are moments where it makes sense to take it seriously, but 80% of the time, it's really not serious. There's a monk I like named Ajahn Sona. He's up in British Columbia. Is that where you are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's outside of there. And he says, it's useful every now and then to remind yourself that everything that's happening is totally ordinary. That it's all very normal. I don't know why that makes me laugh. Like, yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger is normal. It's all very normal. Old age, sickness, and death. Just it's normal. Just how it goes. There's a calm in that, I think, for me anyway.
Yeah, it's strangely reassuring,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it. Like, oh, I'm dying of
Yeah.
leprosy. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. It's
Happens
normal.
all the time.
Yeah. You're struggling. Yeah, that's normal.
It's funny, as a parent, I'm always saying that to my kids because they freak out about different things, right? Or a
Mm.
nightmare, or it could be, oh, I don't. I'm like, yeah, it's okay, it's normal. And it just de-escalates everything in a way that, like, oh, and then they get
Yeah.
forget about it, and
Yeah.
then on with the next thing.
Yeah.
Imagine if that was just the way it was all the time for everybody.
Mm. Well, you need all the time. That's hard to do. Be nice. People are good, though. I notice there's such a good kindness and a genuine humanness, at least for me when I'm walking around in it. But I look for it too, so maybe I'm biasing towards it. Does it feel that way for you? Like that the world is good?
That's a good question. And I don't think of the world as good, and I don't
Mm.
think of people as good. I may be a little bit more cynical. I don't think of them as bad either. I think of people as people,
Mm.
just going about doing their things, many of them misguided, including myself,
Same.
operating from biases, trying to reinforce those biases in the way we interact with each other, and ultimately using each other. We're all getting something out of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be there. We wouldn't be interacting with somebody at some level that we're not getting something out of, even if it is the appreciation of that other person.
Mm.
Like, even to be able to see people as good has an effect on you, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, I get that. There's an inherent selfishness to everything.
But is that bad? Like, is it bad to be
No,
inherently selfish?
I don't think it's bad. It doesn't feel bad.
Doesn't feel bad at all.
No. It only feels bad when I think it's like I've recently been playing with my opinions, of which I've had many, and they're really unnecessary for living life. I don't actually have to have judgments or opinions about anything that's happening if I don't want to. And so there's this kind of personal agitation, me and what I think, it's like I'm bothering me. And then I got into, and I'm curious what you think, our memories, opinions. Because the perception was just that, it was just mine, no one else has it. I thought I saw what I saw. Is that my opinion, my memory? Does it feel that way? Do you know what I mean?
So the way I think about my memory is, so I have a history, which is very factual, all the things that happen up until now. And then I have a memory, which is a smaller selection of those events that are then tied together in a certain way. Like, I don't remember everything about my past. I don't remember even what I ate for dinner 3 nights ago, but I do remember what my class teacher, Mr. Welcome in grade 5, did when he humiliated me in front of the whole class. Random fucking event from 30 years ago over dinner 3 nights ago. So right there, because there's that inherent bias about how I remember my past, that creates memory, which is this very warped version of my past. And that is a story, I think, and that is made up. So the actual event itself may not be how I remember it, might be tweaked a bit. The visions in my mind and the pictures might be a little bit distorted.
Sure.
But why do I remember that over dinner 3 nights ago? You see?
Yeah.
It's something within me that wants to choose that over dinner.
Huh. Maybe the sense of self, now I'm probably troubleshooting. Maybe the sense of self was so apparent suddenly. Because
Right.
imagine, like, you're going along through fifth grade and you're not paying attention to anything, and then all of a sudden I'm here, really here, here. Like all the eyes are on me, and I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And the
40 people
creator's
looking
just
at
like,
you.
yeah, and then it's a
Yeah.
bad moment. Relatively, there's shame or whatever, and it's like,
Yes.
shit,
Yes.
it's me.
Yeah,
Will they eat
exactly.
me? I
And you
really
string
feel,
enough of those moments together, and then you create a narrative of, oh, I'm the victim of life, and it's been unfair to me, and all of that, because like, these things happen, and I remember. But did they happen in proportion to everything else that happened? Because if you're really to lay it all out, then maybe those moments occupy a totality of 10 hours of your life,
right.
versus the other thousands of hours you've lived.
Ah, that's funny. Oh, right. That is hilarious. Because how many nights have you had dinner? You know, like I've been doing the I'm alive 17,292 days. Right. Today's 292, 17,292. And that's a lot of dinner. If I had to remember all the meals, you know, like let alone what else happened.
Like if there was some way to compute, like actually sit down, like maybe AI is useful for this, right? Plug it into your brain, say, all right, AI, tell me total number of hours I've suffered in my life versus total number of hours I've been bored, and total number of hours I've been kind of
See,
okay, and total number of hours happy. I think we'd all be shocked with the results. We
right,
haven't really suffered that much.
right.
And yet the narrative, we tell ourselves that we suffer.
Yeah,
So the data gathering is all warped in our heads.
right. That's funny. Yeah, I probably would have a totally different version of even the little story I don't believe already. Like I don't really believe in the story of my life, but I have a version of it. It's not anywhere though. It's not on the planet. It's just a neurological event. But then if I could see it all, like you just said, that would just rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. That's fun. Or just the emphasis we place, you know, like placing the emphasis on socks. You know, how many different pairs of socks have I tried on in the 17,292 days? Or women I found attractive, or skateboards I've owned, or, you know, et cetera. Like there's just, you could always, I guess, tweak the emphasis of the data to find stranger and stranger things to have pondered, like, huh, 17,000 forks, chopsticks, sunrises. Does it feel weird that none of it's real? I mean, not real, but well, that none of it's available on the planet. That you have this idea of your life, you have this idea of what you did, but it's all in-house, and it's not actually an object. Like I'm going to go to Trader Joe's, and I'm not going to find it in the parking lot of my life. Does that make sense? Like,
It does. And
does
this
it
is
feel
why
like a puppet show or something?
it does. And I bet you it feels like that to everybody. And this is why we have such strong opinions, because if we can convince somebody else of our worldview, it makes it feel more real to us, because we know it's a puppet show. And the more people agree with us, the more real. So we're always trying to make everything concrete and real, because we know fundamentally it's fucking made up. We suspect it, even unconsciously. So now if I can get Ben to agree with me, I'm saying I'm a unicorn. But if I get Ben to repeat, yes, Shiv, you are a unicorn, that makes me a little bit more unicorn.
Right? Yeah, right. Well, that's what I meant earlier when I don't think I exist unless there's other people.
Yeah.
Because where would I be? I'm not in the, I mean, I can't be in your head because I'm pretty large. That'd be pretty painful for you. But there's an image of me in your head somehow. But the in your head thing's a trick. I know that's wrong. There's nothing in the head.
But let's say you live on a deserted island where there's no human beings.
Right.
Maybe no animals, really, just plants and insects.
Do I need a relationship in that state? Would I split so that I would have one?
You use your volleyball and call it Wilson in order to keep your sanity.
Or I become the volleyball, you know, like, how's it going? Good. How are you? Fine. What's going on? What are we going to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do? Coconuts, you know, like something becomes split so that there's twins.
Well, I think that's what people are doing in their heads, because their mind is that deserted island, and they're doing that.
The mind is a deserted island. Oh, that's good. Do we have a flare gun?
We're hoping it's called the Kundalini awakening.
Oh yeah. You put the flare gun in your ass and you just oh, that's fun. Huh. The mind is a deserted island. I like that a lot. Hmm.
So I've noticed when you post on Facebook, you've done this for quite some time. You'll post a video or you post your thoughts, and then pretty soon after that, you'll take it down.
Yes.
So there's very little trace of anything ever posted on there, right? So I think people have gotten used to it, the people who follow you and have for years, because you used to have a YouTube channel with many videos and things like that, and taking it all down.
Yeah.
What was the motivation to do that?
Well, I started to experience anxiety related to being in multiple places at once. So a version of me exists, and I can't, like, I don't mind this. Like, this will sit there, and there's other stuff that sits there. But I would be walking around, and I would suddenly be aware that people could be experiencing some version of me that I'm not able to be there with them. And at first, when I did all of it, it was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. I mean, I didn't have any sense of it. It was chaos, but I didn't have any sense that it was anxiety provoking. And then I felt too thin, like I just felt spread out. And so then I took it down, and it became a part of what happened. Then it felt easier. Then it felt like, okay, I can put things out there and they can be temporary, and that's okay. It's okay that they're temporary. And when I was really at peace with that, then that's when it became kind of the feature of how it goes. And so, yeah. And it's, I just don't, I'm not trying to grow an audience. And that also is a difference. If I was trying to grow something that sat out there on the internet, then I would have to do it differently. But there's no videos on the channel right now. There's nothing, there's one post on the Facebook. And I like the simplicity of that. But also there's something beautiful about just trying to reach 30 people, just trying to reach 100 people. You know, like, there's something really elegant about the small intentionality of the interaction, kind of intimacy. Because I can interact with 100 people. I can't interact with 1,000 people. I can't interact with 4,000 people. I can't interact with 50,000 people, etc. So there's just it feels better too. Like, it feels like when I put it up, I feel good. When I see the beautiful reactions or whatever it is, I feel fine. And when I take it down, I feel good. So now it's just like, that's sort of the way that it goes. Impermanence is a feature of our world, and it's okay if it's a feature of the art process.
It reminds me of this sand artist who there's many videos of these intricate sand art they do on the beach, and then the waves just wash them away. And there's no record of them ever having done it. And the Buddhist mandala is not very different. I mean, there's hours and hours of painstaking effort, and then they just wipe it all up.
Yeah. I got into painting in 2017, and I painted 50 paintings. And they were so precious to me that I had to burn them all on a bonfire, because I was like, this is crazy. I love these things too much. And the bonfire ended up being more beautiful than any of the paintings, like the actual ashes. I made myself watch it, and I liked that a lot. That was helpful.
A weird thing happened to me the other day. Someone sent me an email sounding irate, and they quoted this random blurb from my first book, which I wrote some years ago.
Sure.
And they're like, I don't agree with this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like looking at this blurb and I don't recognize it at all. I'm like, did I say this? And then I'm like starting to type up an email defending that opinion. But then I'm like, oh, wait a second. I don't even know if I agree with that opinion anymore. So why am I defending something like that some other guy named Shiv of 2018 said?
Yeah.
But because it's living there, now I'm not just defending Shiv, this organism that's trying to survive in the world. I'm defending this idea of what Shiv has become.
Yeah.
And it's going to live in eternity, apparently. I have to protect that, the legend of Shiv.
Right.
That's right. The myth of Shiv.
Yeah. From those who are confused, like from people who don't understand, like if it's an artifact, it's not even alive without their input.
Right.
Like every artifact is Frankenstein, and then every viewer or audience member or reader or whatever is the lightning bolt. But they think you made the artifact. They made the artifact. They brought it to life in their whole world, and then they think you're the fault for my opinion. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. That's such confusion. How does artifacting work? How does our interaction with it work? And when are we mistaken as to authorship? Because that's a big mistake. I've never met Marcus Aurelius. I've only read my version of how I interpret his mind. I've never met him, ever. Impossible. Robin Williams, all the people that I find inspiring. All these folks in life that I've never, ever met and that are deeply a part of my interaction with myself. That feels
Can you imagine if you met Marcus Aurelius and you just didn't like the guy? He's just this dick, this asshole who says wise things, and you're so disillusioned because I built this idea of who you are.
Got food in his beard. Yeah, well, they'd say that, right? Like if you really admire people, be careful. Don't spend too much time with them, because they'll normalize. But I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's good that we normalize. But just that all writers, it's like you give birth to something that then the world does something with, but it's not yours after you give birth to it. Do you write? Can I ask you about your writing? Do you write regularly? Like, do you have a writing schedule, and like, how do you deal with that part of your life?
It's so interesting because I enjoy writing, so I try to find time to do it. But the weird thing is there's very little space in my life to sit down in a dedicated, uninterrupted space and write, because it's just life is always happening around me. So I write two different patches of time that I try to leverage. One is when I'm taking a shit. And the other is when I'm sitting with my girls and they're falling asleep at bed, because they like to have somebody in the room when they're falling asleep. And I use that as a great opportunity. It's dark, it's quiet, there's rhythmic breathing in the background, and it's very like conducive to me writing. And that's when I do write. And I've gotten really good at expressing myself quickly in a very short period of time, because it's been the survival process for me. You want to express yourself artistically, better do it in a very short span of time effectively. There's no time to like ponder and play with words, right? But the beautiful thing is because of those constraints, it just flows out of me. I'm not part of the writing process. I'm more witnessing and facilitating it, but the ideas just come. I'm not planning, what am I going to write today? Is there structured or not? It's just like just vomit out onto the thing, and minor editing so it doesn't look like I don't know English grammar, and it's out. That's it.
Cool.
I publish a post within 30 minutes or under 30 minutes. I'd say about 15 minutes of me having written it.
Nice.
And then it's gone. And I don't take my posts down, but I regularly contradict myself all the time. All the time. And then people are like, oh, why are you contradicting yourself? I'm like, how can I be consistent for 700 fucking essays? Are you insane?
Yeah.
My mind changes constantly.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to express ultimate truth here.
Right.
Just looking at it this way, not this way, this angle, that's it.
It's interesting when people don't want you to change, because then you know they're using you. Like I'm definitely a function if I'm not allowed to change. And that's like, whoa, we're into just nonsense. I wasn't born to be a function.
So was that part of it for you, the anxiety that you started off as this very, very funny guy? I remember back when your first set of videos you posted out, they were so fucking hilarious. It was a breath of fresh air because everyone's so stuffy and like unexpressive in this world. And there's you just being absolutely insane and hilarious. And then that became the expectation. Oh, he's the funny guy. Oh, well, Ben, be funny.
Yeah. That didn't happen to me with Be Funny, because I don't know. Like somebody else said this recently, like, do you remember that video where you were an alien? And I was like, no. So I don't have the expectation that I should be funny. But the anxiety was that I was in multiple locations at once. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than to say it that way.
Right.
Like I was in multiple spots, and it was out of my control. And I was also misrepresenting myself by being the lingering version of I've already changed out of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I've already changed out of what I just said. So why am I even pretending that's me in some way that, and that's what the beauty of being able to take it away has been nice.
That's been a big challenge for me as well, as the misrepresentation. You start to feel like you are a version of yourself that no longer exists because it still lives in the minds of other people.
Right. It's in the artifact.
And I did this big, every once in a while, I'll do a blow up post, like blow up expectations of people, because I've been this, you know, very anti-metaphysics guy for such a long time because I was taking a certain stance, a certain position on things.
Yeah.
But then I had, through getting back into meditation and having some very like transformative type experiences, I took a position of, well, it's a bit more open-ended than that. And some people just didn't fucking like it.
Well, of course.
Some people embraced it.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, I have to do this blow up post where like, fuck it, I'm just going to lose 50% of my readership. I don't care. Because what's the other option?
Right.
The other option is to live a lie.
Yeah, no. The audience in the end is on the adventure with you, but they're never the reason the adventure is happening.
Right.
So that's, yeah, good for you that you do that. And that's beautiful, you know, that you're, yeah, I mean, we can radically change. It's okay. Advertisers know this. If you showed the same commercial for the product for 10 years, people are like, that's dumb. I've seen this ad 3,000 times. So we got to make new ads for the same product repeatedly. You know, it's like, I don't see how we're any different than that.
We'll talk about radical change. I'll show you another radical change that's happened in my life after I started meditating. I live in a very small rural part, a town in rural BC, where everyone's kind of very blue collar here, you know, lots of people in the trades. And they got no time for spirituality. They've got no time for any of that. But having moved here, I've become a very like close-knit member of this community. And I see people struggling to maintain their mental health and all of that. And I said, well, something like meditation, even though they've never heard of it or always look at it as some suspicion, maybe something like meditation would be a service for them, or would be helpful for them. And so I'm going to show you. Behind me, I built with my own hands back in. Just give me a second.
Dude, I just got so happy. You have a Zendo in your house.
I
That
built
is
the
so
Zendo.
awesome. That's so beautiful.
So 3 months ago,
Congratulations.
I went, not 3 months ago, sorry. 3 months ago, I started meditating. A month ago, I went down to Home Depot, or the equivalent. I bought 50 2x4x8s, loaded up in my pickup truck, brought it home, borrowed a miter saw from a friend of mine, and just cut it all down and built all those benches. I built that entire studio. And because I said, here is a society of people doing real things like forestry, lumber, like
Yeah,
tangible
yeah,
things. They're not
right.
selling fucking ideas. They're out there building shit, and they're hardworking people, and they're suffering in their own way,
Yeah.
with finances and pressures of life and society. And why not offer a space to come and sit?
Have you had a sit yet, or is this all new?
It's all new. So I had a soft launch last Sunday, and then it's very interesting because this couple came by and they really enjoyed it, and they have a son who is severely autistic and nonverbal,
Mm.
and I think he's in his 20s or something. And they said, "Do you think you'd be able to do a sitting with my son?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, because I don't know what I'm doing when I do this,
Yeah.
but the possibility seems fascinating. I don't know if I can do anything that would be beneficial for him, or if meditation would benefit him. But already I was sort of researching it online, and apparently meditation has been used for people with ADHD and people on the autism spectrum and things like that. And apparently it can help to center that. And I'm like, wow, this is a whole new direction I never even had imagined for myself. Now, how does that match my Advaitaholics personality online? It doesn't at all.
No,
Right?
it doesn't even have to, though.
Right.
Right? You're like, you can phoenix from the ashes anytime you want to.
That's the beauty of it. That's the part lots of people, especially readers and things, don't understand is you can become a completely different person with a
Yeah.
different value set.
Yeah. Well, you can follow yourself in the end, your spirit. You can follow your spirit. Like I can follow my spirit wherever it takes me. And this is poetic the way I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know about it, but I can follow it. That's definitely the truth. Huh. That's so cool. I love the feeling of excitement for that. Because I love those rooms. I've been in many of those rooms, and they're just so something, yes, whatever that is. It's just a yes. And it's not easy. I mean, it's not like bliss is happening all the time or whatever. It's, you know, it's its own athletic event, but cool for good. Congratulations. Just happy for you. Just how beautiful. What a
And
wonderful community service.
the wonderful thing was my mom was visiting just a couple of weeks ago. And all my life, it's been a bit of a challenge with her to understand this side of my personality, right? Because she's not very spiritual. And yet she helped me stay in every one of those benches. And she was so proud of what those benches looked like when it was done. And when she left, she said, "I wish you all the best in whatever this is going to become." It just brought so many things together in a way that if I hadn't done this, because, I'm going to be Mr. Advaitaholic guy, I wouldn't be able to experience, right? So that's what I live for, is that what is that next moment going to look like if I just let it happen?
Right. I think it's Suzuki Roshi. He said someone brought him Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and they said, "This is the book we made of your talks." And he looked through it and he goes, "This is great, but it wasn't me." Yeah, that's cool. In a way, I feel like it's a greater community service too when you do change. Like that's the community service, is to change from whatever was your wheelhouse to the next wheelhouse, etc. Because then people get the permission that it's okay for them to do it. Right. And who wants to stay stuck? Like nobody wants to stay stuck. And at the same time, there's just the slow process of showing up to things. So cool, man.
Well, as always, Ben, this has been such a beautiful experience talking to you. I love how we just explore stuff. It doesn't ever feel like, okay, well, what is the next thing I need to ask? It's never been that, right? It's just two people shooting the shit, and it's always feels good.
I really appreciate your time, and I hope that anyone listening has the same enjoyment that we had.
And if
And
you're
if
ever
not,
coming up to BC, there's a Zendo.
I know I had the thought ran through my head.
You can
Man,
sit.
it'd be cool if I could figure out how to sit there. That's fun.
You're
All right.
welcome anytime. In fact, I have a room attached to it where I plan to, if anyone wants a retreat, well, come here.
Mm.
There's a bedroom, there's a kitchen. Flip you around here, show you the kitchen, right? It's literally
Yeah.
all there for that
Yeah.
purpose exactly, is to provide a space if, a person doesn't have the capacity to create that space for themselves.
Yeah. That's so wonderful, man. I wish you the best of days.
You as well, Ben.
Thank you for your time.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Take care.